doing some stuff with taxes.
Yeah.
And I did a little bit, I'm not a mathematician,
Right.
but I did a little bit of checking. One of the things, one of the policies, like, would you consider thinking about for our veterans, for those who serve, for those who are police department, to where their taxation is the fact that they're giving their bodies to this country? Instead of having to pay taxes, none of these cities want to give them raises, so at least let us keep their money.
You know, I've never heard that before, and it's like a very interesting thing. It's the kind of thing you would think of, right? Because they have been treated so terribly.
It's going to take more than a hug. We need to, and here's the deal. If you're looking at serving in this country, in the military, or a police officer, or a firefighter, and like you're young and you're coming up, and you don't have to pay taxes because you're paying, it's almost an incentive to where you get people interested.
And other countries do that, as you know.
Yeah.
Other countries do that.
Of course they do.
In spades. Yeah, it's something I would think about. You know, something that nobody ever brought up. I've never heard it. It's interesting you're bringing it up. You're like my tax person there. But yeah, I mean, something has to be done.
Yes.
And we have to
I
attract
think you're
people.
the president to do it.
Well, the military is now not attracting people. They're not going in. And I think it's because they don't respect the people at the top, the commanding officer.
Exactly.
They're not, the commander-in-chief is
exactly. The
I
last
think
president's,
we were not having this problem.
who's
5
going to
years
go
ago.
fight for
We have problems in
Biden?
the military right now. You know, the one thing I will say though, and I tell the story, we really did a great job with our military. I rebuilt the military, and we got rid of ISIS. And I got to know them during this very short period of time. It was supposed to take 5 years. We did it in about a month. Remember that?
Yep.
And I got to know the real military, not these guys that are woke and that are like, you know, like, should I mention them? Yeah.
I think we get it with the woke.
No.
Yeah. I'm knowing. Trust
With
me.
Millie and the statements, and I mean, look, I guess Mattis is a nice guy, but we have people in there that are much different. Not the people on television, the people that got rid of ISIS quickly. I was told it was going to take
Exactly.
5 years, and we did it in a matter of literal weeks.
Good leadership.
And I said, this is a great military. And by the
Good
way, they're not
leadership.
woke. You could never make them woke.
President
These guys,
Trump.
You will never, ever make them woke. But they did a great job.
Thanks for
Great
being
job.
here.
These atheists, these feminists, these environmentalists, they all have one thing in common. They don't think that the quality of the character of someone really matters. Instead, they reduce
Matters.
you to the size
Yes.
of your wallet. They reduce you to the tax bracket that you're in. They reduce you to the amount of properties that you own. They reduce you to the degrees that you have behind your name. And so it's no wonder that men all around this country, policemen, firemen, veterans, truck drivers, construction workers, men are under attack. But when they attack the man, what are they really attacking? They're attacking the family. And when they attack Donald Trump, they're not just attacking Donald Trump. They're attacking our entire country. There are people among us who are trying to deface the character of our nation and destroy the souls within. It's a spiritual battle. It's a battle between good and evil, right versus wrong. Some of us see it, many don't. We can't force them to open their eyes, but we can stand up for what's right. We can lead our own lives, and we can bring America back to the place that it once was. It may be 2024, but this is a 1776 moment. God is real. God is with us. God is within all of us. And we're not going to back down. We're going to take America back.
And we're taking it back.
Now, you brought us Space Force.
We're taking it back.
And now partnering with Elon Musk and stuff, I think we're going to have some great things. But one of the things I've been very critical of this administration is that I think we need to have a school force. We need to make our schools hard targets. And there's no, again, looking for employment for our servicemen when they come out. Because I feel like what's happening in schools isn't a police thing, it's a military thing. Because they are trained to look for these signs and stuff. If we had military, not necessarily military, but they'll be coming over for you, social workers, military police.
Stray kids.
So let me
Yep.
ask you this. So
Yep.
what about teachers that are
The
in
homeless.
the military, and the teachers, they leave the military, they become history teachers, they become math teachers, and they're in the room and they get to know the students and they know how to use it. You can't have people that don't have any idea about what to do with guns. But people that were in the military, that are in the classroom, and they have access to guns, whether it's on them or in a little safe or something. You know, the problem is if it's in a safe, it takes a long time
Right.
to get it, right? So, you know, but sometimes I think, and I've heard that and I've thought about it a lot, and in some ways I like that more than just having police standing someplace in the building. Do you like that idea? It would be a small percentage of the teachers, like 5%, but that'd be much more than you would ever have with.
Anything is better than nothing. Our banks are safer than our schools,
Yeah.
and our greatest investment are our kids.
Yeah.
So I have an issue with that. And here's the deal: I've learned a lot about this administration trying to get things done and talking to people. I speak with a lot of mayors and a lot of my travels and stuff. And this administration was supposed to be all about the environment and the Green New Deal and all that crap. But it's amazing. So
Green New Deal. Joke, con job.
Hopefully the end of a campaign and it's going to be successful. But we're in a campaign. Nobody ever talks about the environment. They don't talk about it. They want clean air. They want clean water. This Green New scam is the worst thing that's ever happened. They're destroying the windmills all over the place. You fly over these gorgeous areas. You have windmills going all over.
You're not going to have any birds around. And the ones in the ocean are messing up the whales. Windmills were great back when we all had buggy whips, big carts.
Yeah, they were much nicer then. Actually, they were actually much nicer. No, when you think of what they've done, though, with all of the money that they spent, trillions and trillions of dollars, China does nothing, by the way, just so you understand. You know,
No, China, India, absolutely
no,
not.
they don't do anything. And by the way, that flies right over a country. You do understand.
Yeah.
Those winds, 4.5 days, it's over. So here we are. It costs us twice to make a product, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times.
It's
And we
American
keep it
made.
nice and clean.
Back to
But the
old
wind is
days of
flying in
American
China,
made.
India, and every place else. It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, one of the things that EP
Looks like we'll be getting back to American made products. Yeah.
horrible
Thanks for
problem
being here,
with
everyone.
Sewage and water overfills and things like that, and the budget for these mayors have this budget for the sewage, but yet nothing's ever done, right? These engineers and their plans are based on how
Thank
much
you.
money they get opposed to solving the problem. So Mike Rowe told me about a company.
Good guy.
Oh yeah, Mike, let me put my glasses on. I want to get this right.
I can't believe you wear glasses, huh?
50.
Huh?
Sewage Century, right? Brad Colbert, I believe that you knew his father on the Texas Rangers.
Yep.
So they came up with this little tiny invention. It's like this big little mushroom, a little ball in it. And when you put it in the manhole,
Yes,
it separates
Donald
the
Trump,
gas,
the very
and
best
the little ball
president
comes up and the
in a
water
long
can't come out the
time.
manhole. So the sewage water doesn't spill into overflows. It costs $0.25. You don't need a committee for it. You just put them in. I think one city was like $250,000 opposed to the $20 million they spent, and it pays for itself.
Introducing another.
Well, yes, Donald Trump interview in 2024. You know, the real person here. You're seeing him out of the limelight, being interviewed. It's a commercial. Okay. So,
Upgrade to the Diablo and pruning and clean wood reciprocating
well, I say spider.
durability and
3x3, 3 times longer for your Sawzall blade, spider blade. So just stay tuned here. Yeah, enjoy this. We're getting this replay here, and I'm very honored to be able to do this.
As opposed to the
So let's see what he has to say.
$20 million they spent, and it pays for itself in a year and it's done. So here I am in Louisiana, go, oh, this is great, and we have to form a committee. We have to do this.
Well, you have a great new governor in Louisiana. I bet you did take a look at it because your new governor, a Republican,
Yeah.
is he was the attorney general. Now he's a governor. So if you give me that, I'll send it to him. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sounds good, right?
Yeah,
And why is that something? I mean, it's a big problem, and
it's a problem everywhere. Our drinking water, with, the fluoride in it, we're seeing, and then now we're seeing sewage, and it's a lot of autoimmune diseases.
Fires in California.
I will send it, and I'll bet you get action.
I moved. One, because my daughter's an equestrian now and had to move to New Jersey, but we eventually had to move because not only that, but what we're seeing with the hurricane storms, the insurance companies jacking it up. Now I'm blessed to make a good living, but I'm not paying $300,000 a year
Yeah.
in house taxes. So I made
Insurance is one of the biggest increases, and it's happened in the last 4 years. People are going crazy with the insurance costs. And I say, what about self-insurance? You know, sometimes people are better off with self-insurance. They can't afford the insurance. And then the problem is, when you need the insurance, they don't want to pay. And they negotiate, right? They say, we're not going to pay you. And you end up getting 5 cents on the dollar. It's a
Exactly,
problem. It's a real problem.
And, you know, I know you have a million things to do, but father to the grandfather, I would like to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
I made a mistake with my child, my daughter, when she wanted to get an equestrian. I was supposed to tell her she was allergic. I didn't do that to horses because it's expensive. It's unbelievable. And you guys talked a lot about it. Now, my daughter's now going to Wilmington, Florida to compete.
Okay.
And I had to move the horses down
So
there.
she's very good, right?
Very good. Like I'm in.
That's good.
I'm in.
Good.
Yeah, after this is over, I'll be sweeping this place up.
Good.
Every extra dollar.
Good.
But your granddaughters and your family, do they ride horses as well? They do equestrian?
Not too much. They like it. They do it maybe a little bit, but not like your daughter. No, your daughter's supposed to be very, like you, a talented athlete, right?
Yeah.
You can see it. Now I've heard that.
Yeah, my son plays baseball and travel leagues. I'm the GM. The way I look at it, you're the first one in, last one to leave, daddy invests. I just forgot to put
The
it down
baseball's
like that.
the
A little
baseball's
cheaper.
A little bit less.
It never ends though.
No, but
ends.
it never ends.
No.
Yeah.
But we're gonna be in Wilmington. How far is Wilmington from Mar-a-Lago?
So Wilmington is about 20 minutes away.
Can I get a group rate?
Yes, you're gonna come over. We're gonna have dinner with your daughter and your family, your wife. We're gonna come over and have dinner. But do you mean Wellington or Wilmington?
Wilmington. I say it wrong because I just paid to have the horses
Right.
moved, so it's a little traumatic for
Yeah,
me.
it could be, but it's either one's about 20, 25 minutes to come over. I'd love to have you on.
Thank you, sir.
No, but you're a terrific guy. Look, it's that show has caught on, and the whole group is great. But I've always watched you. You always were defending me, and a lot of people don't defend me, and I like people that defend me because I think I'm doing the right thing. And we have a lot of bad people in our country, you know? We have a lot of people that you almost say they must hate our country because what they do is so bad for our country. But I just have always...
Well, I'm not allergic to straight talk.
Yeah?
And every man of consequence that I learned from in my life never bullshitted nothing with me.
Mhm.
Whether it was Dusty Rhodes, whether it was my football coaches, whether it was anybody I was with, they always told it to me straight, even when I didn't like what I wanted to hear. Because I always believe everybody can handle bad news and good news, but no news and bullshit don't piss down my back, as my grandmother used to say, and tell me it's rain. And that's one thing that you have never done. You always, if you don't want to hear it, because the American people can accept bad news. Because when we know how bad it is, then we can look forward to getting it better. And that's in this age of endorsements.
Yeah.
You know, that's why you have my endorsement, Mr. President. You take that and a cup of coffee and do whatever you want with it.
It means a lot to me. It does.
But
You know, I think this is going to be the most important election in the history of our country.
I agree.
So this interviewer, Tyrus, he is a class act. Let me tell you that. He is a class act for doing this podcast. If you want to check out his podcast, it's called Outkick. I'll have it in the description below the video so you can see the full podcast itself. This wraps up the clip. Before we go, I just want to say that there is a growing movement of people who are standing up for Donald Trump.
Now he's president,
RFK Jr.
and he's making changes.
Elon Musk,
Taking names.
JD
Yeah.
Vance, and now many podcasters like Tyrus who are banding together, not just for Donald Trump, but for our country, to make America great again, to make America healthy again,
He is.
to make America safe again,
He is.
to make America strong again, to make America free again. And this is a critical juncture for our country. I don't think our country can handle 4 more years of Democrats, 4 more years
We
of
don't have to
atheists,
worry about it
4
now.
more
This
years
was
of feminism,
2024.
4 more years of environmentalism. We need to go back to the things that made America great. That's what we all stand for. That's what Donald Trump is trying to bring back, and that's why he is the man for the job. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like, subscribe so you never miss another upload. I'll catch you on the next one.
Ordinary is the opposite.
Well, thank you all for being here. Appreciate your time. Do play this back. Save it. Tell a friend it's a win-win-win. And as always, never give up. because hoods is always a way, always. You've seen it here at Home Improvement Tips. I have plenty of home improvement videos. Check out my playlist. You'll be glad you did. If you have any questions about any of my videos, feel free to ask, and I'll be sure to get back to you and do what I can to help you out or explain what I'm doing. Thank you. Oh, let's see this.
Donald Trump learned a crucial lesson as a child.
Do whatever you have to do. You say whatever you have to say. Winning is everything.
Donald Trump is a major deal maker, and he has made his money mainly from Manhattan real estate.
Trump, 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 Trump. His name is his power.
We realized what Americans really love was celebrity. If you were a celebrity, everything was possible. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired.
You're fired.
Donald Trump is here tonight. He certainly would bring some
Oh,
change
yuck.
to the White House.
Bad president.
We should fight back.
I am officially running for President of the United States.
Here comes the war of the Trumps.
It was war, and they were determined to win it. You don't know what he's going to do next. You don't know what's going to happen.
Thank God. God allowed him to make it into office.
Time as president.
And he knows it. He knows that God saved his soul. Missed. It missed. That was a God thing. You can't be denied. That was a God thing right there.
Of all the men who've influenced Donald Trump, none have had a bigger influence than his father. Fred Trump was born in the Bronx to German immigrants Frederick and Elizabeth. After he finished high school, he took a job as a carpenter's assistant. He liked the work, but he wanted to be the boss. So when he turned 21, Fred incorporated a company, E. Trump and Son, named for his mother, who started the company before Fred was old enough to run it. During the Depression, Fred almost went out of business, but before he did, he got his big break. Fred built one of New York City's first modern self-serve supermarkets and sold it for a profit. He and his business partner used the profits to buy a subsidiary of a bankrupt real estate company for pennies on the dollar. That subsidiary gave them easy access to a bunch of properties that were nearing foreclosure. Fred bought them low, sold them high, and made enough money to turn E. Trump and Son into one of New York's biggest real estate companies.
Who would have known?
He passed his success on to his children.
Who would have known? The right moves during the Depression.
Rooms, and the family chauffeur drove them to school every morning. Fred also passed on his ruthless streak. Throughout Donald's childhood, his father always gave him the same advice: work hard, don't be weak, be a killer. Donald took it to heart. He bullied his classmates. He even bullied his
Not
father.
wrong. That's
One
not.
day, he threw an
He was a
eraser at
child.
his teacher.
He was a
Fred
child,
immediately took action and
acting
sent
like a
Donald to
child.
military boarding school upstate. It was a tough, competitive environment, but surprisingly for a rich kid, Donald thrived. He excelled at several sports and was named captain his senior year. In the yearbook, he was named Ladies' Man. Years later, Donald would credit his time at boarding school with teaching him the discipline he needed to succeed in business and politics. But he knew that discipline by itself wasn't enough. So he went to college, 2 years at Fordham University.
Educate
before
yourself.
transferred to the University of Pennsylvania's business
Can't
school.
go wrong.
After
Got to
graduating in
educate
1968,
yourself.
Donald Trump joined his father's company. The first few years weren't glamorous. Donald and Fred had to roll up their sleeves and turn around some
Discipline.
healthy projects which were losing money. For Donald, it was an early lesson.
Focus.
Just because he'd been given lots of advantages, he still needed to work for his success. After a
Hard
3-year
work.
apprenticeship, Donald became president of the company. The
Relentless.
torch had been passed from father to son. One of his first moves was to rebrand. E. Trump and Sons sounded stale
Educate.
and old-fashioned. A modern real estate business led by a dynamic young entrepreneur needed a glamorous name. So Trump rebranded it to the Trump Organization. It was an early step in the evolution from Donald to Trump.
Remember when he was going bankrupt back in the
Trump moved
80s?
to an Upper East Side apartment and started going to some of Manhattan's elite nightclubs, usually with a beautiful woman on his arm. It didn't look like it to most people, but Trump was working. He was marketing his most important commodity, himself. It was right around this time that he made his debut in another high-profile local institution, the
26.
New York Times. The Times embodied the elite establishment that, decades later, Trump would build a political career upon opposing. But in the early 1970s, he was anxious for their attention and approval. The first time the New York Times mentioned Donald Trump, it wasn't for a good reason. The headline said it all: major landlord accused of anti-black bias in city. The story concerned a Department of Justice lawsuit filed against Donald Trump and his father, which alleged that the Trump organization...
Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Appreciate it. So the YouTube algorithm will share this out. Please hit the thumbs up.
Trump talked to urged him to settle, but that just wasn't who he was. Trump met Roy Cohn at a swanky Manhattan nightclub in the early 1970s. Trump was complaining to anyone who'd listen that he couldn't find a lawyer who believed he could win the discrimination lawsuit. Cohn offered his services. He filed a $100 million countersuit against the Department of Justice. Although it was unsuccessful, the final settlement ultimately allowed the Trump organization to get away without admitting any wrongdoing. It was a win for Trump, and a lesson he'd carry with him for the rest of his life. Never admit your mistakes. Roy Cohn was Donald Trump's lawyer for 15 years.
This is a picture of Donald and me in which he says, Roy is my greatest friend.
Trump soon set his sights on something that could make his career. The old Penn Central Railroad had gone broke a few years earlier and left behind 3 prime real estate assets, the Commodore Hotel and 2 rail yards on New York's west side. The rail yards were the largest undeveloped tracts of land left in Manhattan. If Trump could get his hands on those assets, he'd prove to everyone, including his father, that he could succeed as a developer in his own right. He knew that if he played his cards right, he had a chance. He wined and dined the development agency's lead official. He held press conferences where he outlined his vision for the site. And thanks to his father's political connections, he met face-to-face with the mayor.
It's not always what you know, but who you know. It does make sometimes.
The right to develop the sites. Trump turned the Commodore into the Grand Hyatt.
The Grand Hyatt held its grand opening today.
Probably the most successful hotel, one of them in the country, we feel.
He knew that just winning the development rights wasn't enough. It wasn't going to silence his critics, who said he was only in that position because of his father's money and connections. And it wasn't enough to satisfy his own ambitions. If he truly wanted to be the king of New York real estate, he had to build. And not just anything, something big. So Trump swung for the fences. He promised to build 20,000 apartments.
He shot for the stars.
More than his father had built in his entire career.
All along from 72nd all the way down to 59th, we're going to have magnificent marinas, shopping, restaurants, everything. They're all over the Hudson River.
The local community hated the idea. They thought the proposal just didn't fit with the character of the neighborhood, and they were politically influential enough to block the development. Trump raged. But there wasn't much he could do. Full-scale attack wouldn't work. The situation required deft diplomacy that Trump just didn't have in his toolkit. So when the option came up in 1979, he had no choice but to let it lapse. It was the biggest and most bitter disappointment of his career to date. But in Trump's mind, defeat was only ever temporary. So he made a vow that next time he wouldn't let it slip out of his grasp. In the meantime, he had other things occupying his mind.
Don't forget to hit the thumbs up.
Ivana Marie Zelnikova was a tall, striking blonde with an exotic backstory. A competitive skier and child actor, she married a childhood friend so she could use his Austrian citizenship to escape the Eastern Bloc. After they divorced, she moved to Canada, where she met Trump. A few months after they started dating, they got married at a church on Fifth Avenue on April 9th, 1977. Their first son, Don Jr., was born about 9 months later. Fifth Avenue wasn't just home to the church where Donald Trump got married. He also wanted it to be the new headquarters of the Trump organization. Trump had dreamed of building a tower on Fifth Avenue since he was a kid. To him, it represented the peak of glamour and power. The site he wanted was occupied by a luxury department store. In order to press his case, he kept calling and calling the parent company asking if they were interested in selling the site. They thought he was joking, but he was serious, and he wasn't going to give up. Finally, after a couple years, the parent company's new chairman, who was looking to pay down some debts, said yes.
Bonwitz is being sold to Donald Trump.
Trump secured the site, but that was only half the battle. He still had to persuade the approval committee, which was made up of the same sorts of people who blocked his plans for the rail yards just a couple years earlier. Trump needed a different approach. So this time, instead of aggression, he pointed to the fact that reputable architects liked his plan design. Not everyone was persuaded. The media class hated it. The construction of Trump Tower marked another big step in the journey from Donald to Trump.
This is the greatest skyline in the world, so this is a great addition to New York skyline.
The completion of the tallest concrete building
and it marked the beginning of what would prove to be a highly successful decade.
Hello, welcome to the 80s.
Ronald Reagan, the next president of the United States.
Introducing Macintosh. We have a new formula for Coke.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
I dial the process. Take please for the child complicated.
The murder of John Lennon, one of the most influential people of his time.
This was extra. Little bit of history.
The 1980s were tailor-made for
80
Trump.
history.
Greed was good, and Ronald Reagan proved you didn't need to be a career politician to become president. Only in the 1980s could Trump go from being a real estate developer to a national celebrity who bridged the worlds of finance, entertainment, and politics.
Well, there's a lot of coverage of that.
The newspapers and magazines which had made fun of him were forced to cover his rise. He became a frequent guest on talk shows, whose hosts liked his charisma and his willingness to talk about all sorts of topics. Opening a casino added to Trump's opulent glamour. To many Americans, Trump, who had a tower with his name on it and a glamorous European wife, embodied the 1980s hyper-capitalist version of the American dream.
You'll walk down the street sometimes that people will touch you just for the good luck.
It's a strange phenomenon that's been taking place.
But even though he had almost everything anyone could
Wanted to touch him for good luck. That doesn't work.
thing Trump wanted, but didn't have: the West Side Rail Yard.
I wanted the most out of every run.
Okay, don't forget to hit the thumbs up so YouTube algorithm will push this video out. Appreciate you all being here.
Stay out there.
Oh my God, you're actually restating Scott. Yes, I was restating Scott, yes.
Shop weekly deals at your store or at Walgreens.
This is live, not Memorex. As it's developing. Strike when it's hot. Well, it's hot and I'm striking. Seize the moment. Gotta seize that moment. Sometimes you're at the right place at the right time. Will you seize the moment? That's the question. Seize that moment.
Taken over by a friend of his father's, a man named Abe Hirschfield. Although the redevelopment plan was approved, Hirschfield couldn't finance the project. It was partly because he had made too many concessions to the local government, but mainly it was because Donald Trump was working hard behind the scenes to make sure he didn't get the money he needed. When Hirschfield eventually walked away in frustration, Trump bought the development rights and a second chance.
He didn't have it easy.
Once and for all.
They were fighting against him, trying to prevent him from developing
The
this.
site would house nearly 8,000 apartments and condos, and about 600 football fields worth of TV and movie studio space. Trump wanted to call it Television City.
Donald Trump would like NBC to move to this site on the west side of Manhattan. Why is it so important that NBC stay in New York?
Thousands of jobs, hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes, and perhaps almost as importantly, and maybe more importantly, NBC has a name and image and prestige that you really just don't get with another company.
Once again, the local community stood in his way. But Trump soon realized that his most formidable opponent wouldn't be local residents. It was the mayor. Ed Koch was Trump's mirror image. Each man wanted the same thing. They wanted New York City to be the greatest city in the world, and they wanted to be the main character. But they went about it in very different ways. Koch was a Democrat who described himself as a liberal with sanity. He despised the way Trump constantly tried to strong-arm the state into giving him tax breaks while turning the city into a playground for the ultra-rich. But he was growing increasingly dependent on the tax revenues that Trump and other rich developers brought in. Trump, meanwhile, hated anyone who stood in his way.
I hope that New York City has a different narrative.
We don't know that Trump hated anybody. That was his thinking and his
The two men
verbiage.
had already fought a long battle over the tax status of Trump Tower. Television City was the next battlefront.
How have you the chutzpah to say that this government has been anti-development? That's an outrageous comment on your part, and I can prove that you're wrong.
Koch refused to give Trump the tax breaks he wanted.
I would say he's got no talent and only moderate intelligence. If I've done anything, I've gotten NBC focused on by the city of New York, and I think that's very important. I think it's vital.
Trump again found himself in the uncomfortable position of being powerless. He couldn't overcome the combined resistance of Ed Koch and the community activists. The dream of Television City was dead, and the rail yard site
Good idea, though.
was frustratingly out of reach, at least for now.
Good idea. Trump had a
turned
great
his
idea.
frustration into speculation. He bought a fleet of planes from a bankrupt airline and started his own airline, Trump Shuttle.
I never thought I'd be doing this, I have to tell you. So just everybody have a good time, and for many years enjoy the Trump Shuttle.
He plowed money into expanding his casinos in Atlantic City. But in hindsight, the most important thing he did was release a book. The Art of the Deal was about Trump's life, career, and business strategy. It was a big success, and it was his gateway to what would become his future career.
If you lost your fortune today, what would you do tomorrow?
Maybe I'd run for president.
30 years before he ran,
What do you know?
Donald Trump was talking about the same issues.
The United States is systematically being ripped off by many of the wealthiest countries of the world.
The fact is that the world is ripping
Now he's doing something about it.
us off bigly. Saudi Arabia is ripping us off bigly.
Everybody's taking advantage of the United States. We're defending Japan and the Japanese folks, who I respect greatly, but they're not treating us fairly.
Trump didn't just talk about politics on TV. He spent nearly $100,000 on a full-page ad where he criticized U.S. foreign policy.
I find those ads ridiculous. He spends $100,000 for self-advertisements. Who's really interested in his foreign policy? Anybody? Maybe Mrs. Trump.
They understand it
Trump's
now.
politics were shaped by his fear of weakness and by the zero-sum environment of Manhattan real estate.
We're going to have a war through weakness because this country is acting so weak toward Iran. It's pathetic.
In real estate, at least the kind of real estate that excited Trump, there was no such thing as a permanent ally or a win-win situation. Everything was temporary and transactional. Foreign affairs worked differently. After the success of The Art of the Deal and the positive reaction from some quarters to his political statements, Trump realized the public wanted to hear what he had to say, even about issues outside his wheelhouse.
You have said that if you ran for president, you'd win.
I think I'd have a very good chance. I mean, I like to win. When I do something, I like to win. I like to do well, and I think I probably would have a pretty good chance.
Trump enjoyed moonlighting as a political commentator, but events would soon drag him back.
He knew politicians, therefore he had the inside scoop none of us
A
had.
pair of Forbes journalists were sent a leaked copy of a financial disclosure statement that Trump had to file with New Jersey's Casino Control Commission. The report revealed something which no amount of bluffing could hide. Donald Trump was drowning in debt. He fought hard to keep the story from being published, but it went to print with just one last-minute edit. His net worth was bumped up from 0 to $500 million. By now, being seen as rich and successful was an important part of Trump's business strategy. So the accusation that he wasn't actually as rich as he claimed to be was a big blow, especially when it was made by a media that was itching to bring him down a peg.
There's no reason to expose yourself to millions of people.
Do you know why you do it?
Why?
Love, the publicity.
Oh, I hate the publicity.
Oh,
I'm telling you, I hate the publicity.
wait.
The revelation that Trump and his businesses were struggling financially marked the end of peak Trump and the beginning of the hardest period of his entire career.
Yep, he had to file bankruptcy.
The 1980s would boom,
And
the
part of his
1990s would
wealth.
crash. So what happened? It was a combination of both the micro and the macro. The micro was, well, that he was Donald Trump. He didn't pursue what you'd call a disciplined personal investment strategy. Instead, he leveraged against what was becoming his biggest asset, his personal brand. But brands can lose their appeal. The macro was slightly more complicated. When Trump began his career, New York City was experiencing a major economic and social crisis. He took advantage of historically low property prices and, frankly, a government that was desperate for extra revenue. When the economy rebounded, his fortune grew rapidly. His entry into the casino business followed a similar pattern. He got in soon after New Jersey legitimized casino gambling. Most of Trump's acquisitions were funded by debt. And that wasn't necessarily a problem, so long as the economy stayed strong. But that's not what happened. Right at the beginning of the 1990s, the US economy slipped into recession. Trump's businesses were all dependent on high levels of consumer spending. When the economy slowed down, they stopped spending money, and Trump started hemorrhaging cash. At one point, Trump was more than $3 billion in debt. In exchange for an emergency loan that kept the Trump organization afloat, Trump had to sell his yacht, airline, and part of the Grand Hyatt, one of his first ever real estate projects. His 3 casinos declared bankruptcy. He was even put on an allowance. Trump's high-profile problems weren't limited to his career either. His marriage was collapsing. Trump had started an affair with an aspiring actress, Marla Maples. The affair was splashed across tabloid headlines, in full view of the public, Ivana, and the couple's 3 children, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka.
Best sex I've ever had. This is the
That
best.
was wrong.
Ivana better deal.
When they
That
divorced
was
in
wrong.
1981, Ivana got $14 million, the 45-room Connecticut mansion, and an apartment in Trump Plaza. Trump's critics greeted his downfall with schadenfreude. To them, his problems proved that the image he portrayed of being a self-made man who won by taking bigger risks than anyone else was fake. Instead, he only got to where he was because he received the sort of help other people didn't have access to. Generous tax breaks from the government and millions of dollars worth of gifts and low-interest loans from his father. Trump took big risks because he knew he had a safety net. And it was those risky, high-profile investments that had created the Trump legend. Just when it looked like Trump had hit rock bottom, he was forced to find
That's smart. You're going to fault him for being smart?
the West Side
Really?
Railroads. Community activists
Who wouldn't do the same thing in his shoes?
From Trump's struggles. They developed their own plans for the 76-acre lot. Once he'd accepted the proposal brought by the local activists, all the political opposition he'd been facing suddenly melted away. He eventually sold the development rights to a consortium of businessmen from Hong Kong. It saved him from the ultimate indignity, filing for personal bankruptcy, and it marked the beginning of one of the most famous and controversial comebacks in history.
Running your business can feel like a jungle, overwhelming.
You know, they're going to fault Trump because he had access and he used it and leveraged it in his favor. Who wouldn't do the same in his shoes? If they were motivated, if they were focused, they had goals, ambitions.
Odoo saves time to focus on what you really love.
Every single one of us would have.
Book your demo at
You know, he did the right thing. You know, it takes 2-3 generations to lose the wealth of a family because everybody's living off of it. They're not taking it and reinvesting it and building it. And so they end up broke. When if they continue to build and develop, they'd never go broke.
Marriage and almost destroyed his career was a major inflection point in his life. From now on, he wasn't going to be the biggest developer in New York City. He had to become something else. But if Trump was going to reinvent himself, first he needed a comeback. Comebacks are a key part of Trump's psychology. They're his way of telling himself and the whole world that even though it looked like he might be losing, he actually just wasn't winning yet.
Get knocked down, you get back up again, you get knocked down, you get back up again. That's what I'm talking about.
Is that the facts come second to the story. That's not to say the comeback wasn't real. It was. Trump made a good deal when he sold the development rights to the West Side Rail Yard site. Taking the Trump Plaza Casino public on the New York Stock Exchange helped him solve his immediate cash flow problems. And convincing the banks that they didn't want to get involved in the casino business took a lot of courage and instinct. All up, Trump went from a net worth of negative $900 million to positive $700 million in 5 years. But he was never content to let the numbers speak for themselves. In word and deed, he told America that he was back. He started splashing out on high-profile assets like the Miss Universe, Miss USA, and Miss Teen USA pageants, as well as a 70-story office building at 40 Wall Street, which he renamed the Trump Building. He released The Art of the Comeback, a book-length announcement that he was back, and that he remembered the names of everyone who deserted him in tough times. Telling everyone that he was back generated business opportunities, positive media stories, and a sense of momentum that was impossible to resist.
Mr. Trump here wrote The Art of the Deal. Then he wrote a new bestseller, The Art of the Comeback. 2 books. Wow.
It was genius, and it taught Trump a lesson. People love a comeback story. He filed it away for future reference.
Over the years, I've surprised a lot of people. The biggest surprise is yet to come.
Now that he had a comeback story to sell, Trump became curious about another potential run for the presidency. A political consultant he'd started working with by the name of Roger Stone commissioned some polling. More than 3/4 of respondents said they'd never vote for him. But despite that, there was good raw material to work with. He was one of the most famous people in America. Just 17% of respondents, basically 1 in 6, had no opinion about Trump. And people loved his story. They saw a successful businessman who embodied the American dream. They saw him as someone who got things done.
I sort of love and hate him at the same time. I mean, I think he has, you know, a monumental ego.
He comes off as being very, what's the word I'm looking for? Arrogant? Yeah, he's arrogant.
I like it. You ain't got a bag, got everything.
Perhaps the most interesting result was that more people, about a quarter of all respondents, saw Trump as liberal, more than the share of people that saw him as a conservative. Trump's political identity had long been a mystery, perhaps even to himself. He was a rich guy at a time when being rich almost automatically meant being Republican, but his social life, the parties, the girlfriends, the tabloid stories made him seem more like a Democrat. Remember, this was a time when the Democratic president happened to be a well-known womanizer.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
The results bolstered Trump's belief that if he put his mind to it, he could be president.
They say a job like president requires a big ego. How do you think? You think you can handle it?
I'm not sure my ego is big enough. That's one of the things which I can.
Really? Can I write that down?
You can write it.
But before he could make any decisions about what to do next, tragedy struck. In June of 1999,
I don't know how
his
long
father,
this is.
Fred Trump, died. He'd been suffering from dementia for years, and when he contracted pneumonia, he couldn't fight it off. Privately, Donald was heartbroken, but publicly, he used the occasion to reminisce about his favorite subject, himself. He began his eulogy to his father by saying that it was the toughest day of his own life. It was ironic, he said, to have learned of his death right after reading a New York Times story, front page, about one of his own successful developments. Marla Maples didn't attend Fred Trump's funeral. Her and Donald had divorced 17 days before his death. Instead, Trump was accompanied by Melania Naus, a Slovenian model who he'd been dating since the previous year.
How did you two meet?
We met in New York, 1998.
Liking right away.
It was a great chemistry and energy.
After the funeral and a drawn-out fight over his father's will, Trump turned his focus back to the question he'd been mulling over since before his father's death. Should he run for president? This time, he'd come closer than ever before, but it wouldn't be as a Republican or a Democrat. Instead, he almost ran for the party that, out of nowhere, had emerged as a real force in American politics. Before Donald Trump, there was another successful businessman who'd made a massive impact on US politics. His name was Ross Perot, the founder of a successful data company. Perot ran for president in 1992 and 1996.
Do you want a government that comes at you from Washington, or do you want a government that comes from you? Okay. Who do the people in Washington work for? Who pays their salaries? I want to be your president.
Yeah, let's not forget it. We pay them and they work for us regardless.
Kind of politics. His views didn't fit neatly into either the Republican or Democrat
It's
columns.
local or
He was
federal.
skeptical about free trade at a time when both major parties supported it. And he supported a balanced federal budget while also wanting to raise taxes on the wealthy. Lots of people, especially those who didn't support him, called Perot a populist. Whatever he was, he struck a chord with voters. Perot won almost 18% of the popular vote running as an independent in the 1992 election, the highest share won by a third-party candidate for 80 years. 4 years later, he won 8% of the vote as the Reform Party candidate. In his penthouse, Donald Trump was watching closely. A successful CEO with experience running a big company had just shaken up American politics. Perot demonstrated that there were votes in challenging the consensus on mainstream issues.
So Perot showed Trump he could be the man.
Gain recognition. If he ran, why couldn't he win? Acting on the advice of his friend Jesse Ventura, a former professional wrestler who'd been elected governor of Minnesota, Trump joined the Reform Party. He formed an exploratory committee, went on talk shows, took a high-profile campaign swing to California, and vowed to spend $100 million to win not just the Reform Party nomination, but the presidency. He rushed out a book outlining his policy proposals. He even talked about having Oprah as his running mate. Trump won the Reform Party's California primary. It looked like he'd win the entire nomination. He could have been up on stage with George W. Bush and Al Gore, two guys who weren't exactly known for their charisma. And then, just as quickly as he entered the race, Trump dropped out.
I'm not going to be running. The party is, as you know, self-destructing.
The Reform Party was being consumed by infighting. Trump believed it wasn't in a position to give him the support he needed. But that was a smokescreen. Even after the Reform Party collapsed, he could have just run as a self-funded independent. Trump didn't run in 2000 because he knew that if he ran and didn't win, he'd look like a loser. That was his biggest nightmare.
I would run if I thought I could win, and in order to
Not only the nomination, but the presidency.
the whole thing. I don't want to get 20% of it, and I think I could, and I know I could get the nomination, but I always said, and I said to you, if I could win the whole thing, you can only win the whole thing with a totally unified army.
But Trump didn't close the door on a future run. When asked by a reporter if he'd consider running again, for real, he said he'd consider it in a few years.
It's a real possibility.
We're back to the flirtation here.
Well, I always flirt.
6 months after the 9/11 terror attacks, a man named Mark Burnett came to see Donald Trump with an idea. He'd just finished producing a popular primetime TV show called Survivor, and he wanted to remake it. Only this time, instead of being set in the jungle, it would be set in the boardroom. And he was wondering if Donald Trump would be interested in being one of the hosts. Trump thought it over for a while before agreeing. A couple of
You're
weeks
fired.
later, the debut episode of The Apprentice went to air.
New York, my city, where the wheels of the global economy never stop turning.
More than 20 million people tuned in on average every week to see contestants face off in various business-related challenges. But the real star was Donald Trump. NBC quickly shelved plans to have rotating hosts and built the entire show around him. In the intro to the very first episode, Trump invoked his comeback of a few years earlier.
I was seriously in trouble. I was billions of dollars in debt. But I fought back and I won. Big league. And as the master, I want to pass along my knowledge to somebody else. I'm looking for The Apprentice.
The Apprentice was one of the best things that ever happened to him. Over the 14 seasons he was host, Trump made close to $500 million from his salary, licensing, and other residuals. And it did wonders for his reputation. By the 2000s, real estate had been overtaken in the cool stakes by industries like tech. Trump, by virtue of his personality, was partly immune to that effect. But by beaming him into millions of homes every week, Trump was also reminding people that he was a successful businessman with a lifestyle worth emulating. The Apprentice was a major step in the transformation of Trump, from being primarily a real estate developer to being someone whose main business was selling his own name.
You seize an opportunity. You get a hit TV show, and the show isn't even on that long, and you're thinking fragrance, board game, books, suits, and you get all that out there. I've been on the air for 11, coming up on 12 years, not one product.
Most of these products failed, some after a few years, others almost immediately. But that was almost beside the point. They were all possible because of the success of The Apprentice. It was 2009, and Trump was about to release his latest book, Think Like a Champion. The U.S. was facing major upheaval on two fronts. The collapse of the investment bank Lehman Brothers triggered a wholesale financial meltdown and recession. And just months after, the country elected its first ever non-white president. The combination of those two seismic events was fundamentally altering the country's politics. For Donald Trump, who by now was a Republican again, this transformation looked like bad news. In 2010, he was introduced to the director of a documentary about the financial crisis. His name was Steve Bannon. Bannon was a microcosm of the evolution of conservative politics. He'd been an investment banker for Goldman Sachs. From there, he pivoted into media, where he ended up becoming the executive chairman of Breitbart News, a bomb-throwing right-wing news organization. At Trump's luxury penthouse apartment atop the tower that bore his name, the two men talked about how China was ripping off the United States. It was just like Trump's old diatribes against Japan, updated for a new age and a new rival.
In the United States, the majority of Americans say the country is on the wrong track, and no segment of the electorate is more frustrated with the U.S. government and President Barack Obama than the folks driving the Tea Party.
Obama should have never been president.
It's hard to define because it doesn't want to be. It's anti-big government, anti-liberal, anti-Barack Obama. But after that, the lines blur.
The Tea Party movement was partly inspired by a backlash to
Tea
Barack
Party
Obama,
was a good
but
movement.
it was also an eruption of anger about issues that had been bubbling up under the surface for years.
Tea Party was a good movement.
Welfare and government overreach. Dozens of Tea Party
Now's a good time to rebuild the Tea Party.
Republicans in primaries.
Now's a good time to rebuild the Tea Party.
Despite the massive amounts of energy generated by the Tea Party movement and major gains in the 2010 midterms, Republicans didn't have a candidate who could channel that energy. Lots of Republicans wanted to vote for someone who wasn't afraid to throw a punch. someone they knew and liked, and someone who wasn't afraid to say some pretty outrageous things. Who would be their champion?
Now is a good time to rebuild the Tea Party. And if Trump could turn around the electric going up in California, that would be great. Here in California, they want to raise our electricity prices. Let's bring them down, President Trump. My president, he's a champion. And we won big. God made sure of it.
In early 2011, Trump spoke at CPAC, a high-profile Republican conference. He walked out to the ABBA song Money, 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 called Republican candidates losers, quoted a magazine story about what a great entrepreneur he was, and promised to repeal Obamacare. It was classic Trump. What was
really, it's Hillary Clinton care. Obamacare is actually Hillary Clinton's health care plan.
If the audience didn't take the bait, he'd probably have dropped it.
Most don't know that Obamacare is actually the Hillary Clinton health care plan.
Questions about where Obama was born was a strategy modeled directly on his campaign against the Central Park Five more than 20 years earlier. Trump happily exploited people's racial biases because doing so helped generate publicity.
I wanted to show his birth certificate. There's something on that birth certificate that he doesn't like. Oh my gosh.
Thanks mainly to the birther claims, Trump surged to the top of early polls for the 2012 Republican presidential nomination.
Falsifying birth certificate. Obama should not get his money he's getting as president. That needs to be removed from him. Obama should have that money removed from him that he's getting for being president.
I know where my birth certificate is, but a lot of people don't.
A few weeks later, he got his revenge when he roasted Trump at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
No one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest
Ha!
than Donald.
Lies.
And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter.
Really? Like, if we...
Trump responded to the humiliation by pulling out of the race. In the end, despite the excitement created by candidates who were on board with the Tea Party's agenda, the Republican nomination was won by Mitt Romney, a polite Mormon who'd founded a private equity firm.
Obama should have never been president.
Enough Republicans to vote for him in the general election. Everyone expected Trump's interest in politics to fade, and for him to move on to other interests. If anything, his interest deepened. To people who made a career out of following Trump, it actually wasn't a surprise. Trump had a short attention span for things he didn't really care about. But when it came to things he did care about, like the West Side rail yards, he could be very determined. During this time, America was changing. News had become more and more polarized, and a spate of alternative news sources had begun popping up, such as Breitbart News. Trump took notice of the void that these organizations were filling and had begun really pushing the same narratives on his now blossoming Twitter account. Large swaths of the country were becoming red-pilled, and so was the Republican Party. Republicans won big in the 2014 midterms, winning the Senate and expanding their majority in the House. And they won by talking about crime, border security, and the threat from countries like China. Pollsters couldn't remember the last time so many candidates won, despite having net negative approval ratings. Trump had always believed he could become president, but he'd never had the support from a major party he needed to actually win. Suddenly, the stars were aligning. Americans, especially Republicans, were willing to listen to increasingly radical solutions to the problems they faced. But no one on either side of the political aisle had Trump's charisma or name recognition. If you could put it together, it could be a potent combination. On June 16, 2015, Donald Trump descended down an escalator at Trump Tower, with his wife Melania by his side, and Neil Young's Rockin' in the Free World playing and Change the World.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
He opened his speech by lamenting that the United States didn't have victories anymore. The country had become a dumping ground for everyone's problems. Billions of dollars had been spent on overseas wars with nothing to show for it except dead and maimed soldiers. The economy was weak and being made weaker by Obamacare and trade deals that were offshoring.
Hillary Clinton's health care plan,
Republicans
Obamacare.
weren't serious about tackling the problems facing the nation. Trump's candidacy was a comeback narrative. He engineered one of the most famous comebacks in history. He could do the same for his country. The mainstream media, which had never really taken him seriously, treated Trump's speech largely as a joke.
I will personally not give a campaign check now.
Does anybody seriously think that Donald Trump is serious about running for president?
But his campaign wasn't a joke. In fact, Trump had been planning it for months. He'd hired a staff and kept guys like Stone and Bannon close. Contrary to the public perception of Trump as scattered, they maintained a laser-like focus on issues where they knew that Trump's views resonated with voters, like trade and immigration. A few months before Trump went down the escalator, his advisors suggested that he start talking about a physical wall on the US border with Mexico. They actually intended it mostly as a metaphor that would remind him to talk about immigration. But Trump took it literally, and his instincts were correct. The wall became one of the most enduring images of his entire presidential campaign, and it ensured that Trump was always taken seriously on immigration. The mainstream media might have treated Trump as a joke, but Republican leaders didn't. Trump was their worst nightmare. Remember, they wanted to extend an olive branch to minority voters. Meanwhile, Trump was on stage talking about how Mexican immigrants were rapists. But establishment Republicans would soon learn that they couldn't do anything to stop him. The 2016 Republican primaries became the Trump show.
You call women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
He turned politics into must-watch TV, and voters loved it.
He hit my hands. Nobody has ever hit my hands. I've never heard of this one. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee.
Trump quickly rose to the top of the polls. In private, he didn't think he'd stay there, but his campaign just kept gathering momentum, and events overseas ensured it would stay that way.
Wow, this was a bonus. I didn't know this was coming. Good, right timing. Right place, right time.
Killed 14 people at a work Christmas party. Trump, who'd made headlines the previous month after terrorists killed 130 people in attacks in Paris, quickly called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States. It was a significant escalation of his anti-Muslim rhetoric in the campaign.
You get rid of Sharia law in America. It doesn't belong in America.
But they couldn't land a blow.
We don't try to take our American Constitution to Arabia or anywhere else in the Middle East.
Voters didn't care about convention. Instead, they rewarded him for talking about issues in a way they perceived as true. Trump himself recognized that he was wearing plot armor and could get away with saying some pretty crazy things.
My people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
2 months after the shooting in San Bernardino, Trump's name appeared on a ballot for the first time as an active candidate at the Iowa caucuses, which marked the start of voting in the Republican primaries. Despite leading the polls, Trump actually finished second in Iowa behind Ted Cruz. Lots of people, including most of the mainstream media, breathed a sigh of relief. Surely they thought the madness was about to end. The adults were about to take over, but Trump was just getting started. He won in New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, a state where more than a quarter of people were African American. Soon, Trump's opponents were forced to admit something. To have any chance of stopping him from winning the nomination, they had to work together. The field was soon whittled down to just 3 candidates: Trump, Cruz, and Ohio Governor John Kasich. People who were desperate to see Trump fail thought he might stumble under the pressure of being closer to the finish line, especially as questions began being asked about his tax returns. Before 2016, it was customary for serious candidates to release their tax returns as part of the public vetting process.
I'm not releasing tax returns because, as you know, they're under audit. You know, the only one that cares about my tax returns are the reporters.
But Trump simply chose to play by a different set of rules. He knew his tax returns would be full of compromising details like big debts and business dealings in places like Russia. So instead of releasing them, he concocted an excuse about how he wasn't legally allowed to because he was being audited by the IRS. It was yet another example of how he was able to run rings around both his opponents and a critical media. As the Republican convention, the event where a nominee would be formally selected, approached, Trump had a huge lead in the delegate count. He won 41 of the 56 primary contests. It looked like a formality. Ted Cruz made a last-ditch attempt to get delegates to change their mind. But just like every other attempt Republicans made to stop Trump, it failed.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
Something which for years had seemed totally impossible had, in truth, been inevitable for months. Donald Trump had concocted a hostile takeover of the Republican Party and made it look easy. He'd done it by tapping into a well of genuine grievances about American society and the economy, and having the charisma to say what other people weren't willing to. And now, almost 30 years after he first flirted with the idea of running, he was the nominee of a major party, set to run against a highly experienced and well-known opponent, Hillary Clinton. You couldn't imagine two more different people. Trump was the brash real estate developer.
Thank God Hillary didn't make it into office.
Clinton was the Secretary of State and former First Lady who'd been preparing.
Don't forget Benghazi.
Serious people expected Clinton to win pretty easily in November.
Benghazi. Our military got wiped out because of Hillary.
Clinton's campaign found itself fighting allegations and answering for thousands of private emails sent to and from its chair, John Podesta, that were hacked and published by WikiLeaks.
And the Clinton campaign knows this could be a problem for them every day until Election Day.
In the leaked emails, leading Democrats talked about how to undermine Bernie Sanders. The DNC hack could not have come at a better time for Republicans. They've been trying to make the Democrats' sloppy information security an election issue ever since the FBI opened an investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State. The leaks gave them an opening to attack Clinton for her personal ethics, and they looked like great fodder for Trump.
Her criminal action was willful, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful.
But despite first appearances, the leaked emails weren't all good news for Trump. In fact, they brought up an issue that he'd been trying desperately to avoid. Why did Donald Trump seem to like Vladimir Putin so much?
He didn't have to like him
The two men dated back to at least 2013,
or agree with him.
when Trump wrote a tweet asking if Putin would attend the Miss Universe pageant in Moscow and whether he'd become his new best friend. That was weird, but at the time, no one really paid much attention. But since then, Putin had sent Russian troops to annex Crimea and destabilize the democratically elected government in Ukraine, a U.S. ally. And long before then, his disregard for the rule of law had turned him into one of the United States' main geopolitical adversaries. Trump seemed to genuinely like Putin and admire his strongman political style. But people also wondered if there was something deeper. Did Trump have business interests in the country? Did the Russians have compromising material on him? And why was Trump acting so weird about it?
Do you have a relationship with Vladimir Putin?
I do have a relationship. What exactly is your relationship with Vladimir Putin? I have no relationship with Putin.
Trump's reluctance to criticize Putin cut against a core part of his pitch to American voters, that he would use the negotiation skills he'd honed over a long business career to stop the US from being ripped off by other countries. But he saw things a different way. If Russia was willing to interfere in the US election on his behalf, why should he stop them? Besides, Trump was confident that after 40 years in the spotlight, Americans knew who he was, for better or worse. As the campaign neared its conclusion, Clinton had established a small but clear polling lead. If it held up on election night, she'd become the country's first female president. But there were still two more surprises in store. A month before the election, the Washington Post published a video of a conversation Trump
We need to keep the Democrats out of presidency. The Democrats pulled this country down.
And when you start, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the you can do anything.
The tape was large caliber ammunition for Trump's critics. It showed he was crude, misogynistic, and not fit for the office he was seeking. Trump knew it was bad, because for the first time in his campaign, and maybe for one of the first times in his adult life, he apologized.
I've never said I'm a perfect person,
nor pretended to be someone that I'm not. I've said and done things I regret, and the words released today on this more than a decade-old video are one of them.
The campaign briefly went into lockdown.
There you go.
Some people even told Trump
From
to
the
drop
horse's
out,
mouth.
but he had no intention of doing anything like that. Instead, he used the time to plan his counterattack.
I've said some foolish things, but there's a big difference between the words and actions of other people. Bill Clinton has actually abused women, and Hillary has bullied, attacked, shamed, and intimidated his victims.
And killed our military.
Before the second presidential debate with the women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual
Leaked
assault
out our information.
the playbook of New York
Had our
race.
computers in her garage, really?
He went on the offensive.
And got away with it all.
Trump was willing to do whatever it took to win, and that despite his own flaws, his opponents weren't spotless either.
Mr. Trump may have said some sad words, but Bill Clinton raped me.
The tactic worked. Instead of the Access Hollywood tape, people started talking about Trump's audacity and Bill Clinton's past. The Access Hollywood experience hardened Trump's belief that he would be rewarded by his supporters for standing up to what they saw as the politically correct establishment. If the mainstream media and Democrats and even some Republicans wanted him to drop out, that was like a badge of honor he was happy to wear. But an eventful campaign still had one twist left.
The FBI reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email use. Director James Comey explaining in a letter
There
to
you go.
Congress, in connection with an unrelated
She got away with
case,
it.
The FBI has learned of the existence of emails that appear to be pertinent to the investigation.
James Comey's decision to reopen the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server was a shocking last-minute surprise. Still, it looked like it was too little too late. On election night, Trump wasn't expecting to win. He enjoyed how close he'd come and enjoyed a campaign which had been built around indulging him. He settled in for the night at his Trump Tower penthouse. Clinton, meanwhile, had booked out the Javits Center, a convention center with a glass ceiling she thought she'd be breaking through, which just happened to be built on a site which Donald Trump used to own back in the 1970s. And then, over the course of the night and into the early hours of the morning, history was made.
Clinton or Trump? It's time for America to decide.
We will, of course, retain the White House with the election of Hillary Clinton. America will vote Trump.
We have a projection. It is a big one. It is the state of Florida. 29 electoral votes. They go to Donald Trump.
We have already called Ohio for Donald Trump.
And in modern times, the way Ohio goes has been the way the country has gone.
Both Clinton and Trump are putting a ton of attention in one particular battleground state, North Carolina.
Donald Trump has won the state of North Carolina.
Donald Trump wins Wisconsin, surpassing the 270 electoral votes.
Huge news. Actually, the AP now projecting that Donald Trump has won the state of Pennsylvania.
There's just no path forward for Hillary Clinton. That's 20 electoral votes from Pennsylvania.
This is CNN breaking news.
The American people have spoken. Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States.
Despite getting almost 3 million fewer total votes, Trump won the states he needed to and pulled off an incredible upset. The man almost no one thought would actually run, who no one thought would last the distance, who no one thought would win the nomination, and who almost no one thought would win the election had triumphed. It didn't matter that almost no one thought Trump could do it. He always believed he could. 2.5 months later, on a cold January day, he was inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States.
For the first time, the 45th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Throughout his career, his candidacy, and then his presidency, Donald Trump changed the United States in profound ways. He grabbed hold of the fault lines in American society and ripped them wide open.
No, this 2025.
Why did he run for president?
No, this 2025 that they're trying to implement or want to implement is dictatorship.
Prove people wrong.
We don't need this 2025 being implemented, period. That's dictatorship.
The mainstream media who never took him seriously, the establishment who considered him unworthy of higher office, and the people who deserted him when he was at rock bottom in the 1990s. I truly believe that Trump decided to run for president after being humiliated by Barack Obama at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. What better way to stick it to all those coastal elites than by taking over the office they cared so much about? And what better way to prove to his father that he was a killer?
I don't think people change very much. I don't like to analyze myself because I might not like what I see.
To learn more about the man who defeated Donald Trump in the 2020 election, Joe Biden, just watch this video next. Thanks for watching.
Not good, not good. Well, thank you all for being here. This is Home Improvement Tips. I'm Ken. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Check out my playlist where you can see all kinds of tips and tricks and shortcuts and easier ways of getting a job done. And professional tips, best kept secrets. Check out my playlist. Well, I'm Ken. This is Home Improvement Tips. I look forward to hearing from you. Save this for a future reference. Share it with a friend. And as always, never give up because there's always a way. Always. And you see that here on this channel, up close and personal. And as we see it as Trump did not give up because there's always a way, always. Bye for now. God bless. Take care and pray for this country. Keep this presidency and this government up in prayer. And pray for the world. And pray for that people find Jesus. That they come to know the Lord and Savior personally in their lives. It makes a difference in my life every day. You can have no hope and you can have hope. You can be down. You can be hopeless and have hope and security and certainty. Heaven can be your heavenly home because Jesus made a way. All right, well, take care. God bless, and save this, please. Check out my playlist, and I look forward to hearing from you. And thank you for being here. God bless you. Bye for now. And have a great weekend, what's left of it. And no churches are perfect, but find one. Just pick one. You'll be glad you did. Bye for now. Remember, we're all human. Let's give allowances for being human. God bless.